Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first order of business is the approval of the minutes for the March 5th meeting.
Make a motion to approve them as submitted.
Second.
The motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. Next, we have approval of the CSE, CPSE recommendations.
I don't have a question on those, just a statement that it's very nice that the board notes are on there so we can clearly see the changes. That's really helpful.
And that was the request that the board had, right? I
Yep,
believe?
yep. It does that. Make a motion, we accept them.
Second. The motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are approved. Next, we have public comment.
Are they going
That's a
to
presentation. You guys are doing the travel club, right? Presentations? Okay. Any general public comment? Anyone here for general public comment? If not, then we will definitely move to our senior class trip. Welcome. Come on up to the podium. Pretty please.
What is senior class officers? Brian Hart, Steve Foster,
Caroline Lawrence.
Cutting, I'm just subbing in for Tracy, she's out today.
So this is our proposal for our senior trip. So the senior class has decided on a 3-day, 2-night trip to Boston, Massachusetts and Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. We plan to depart Walton on Thursday, June 6th at 8 a.m. and we'll stop for breakfast on the way to Hampton Beach. And then we'll continue to Boston, Massachusetts, where we'll have a hotel. On the second day, we plan to spend the morning touring the aquarium and then go to Quincy Market. And then after lunch, students can spend time touring Boston. In the evening, we hope to enjoy a dinner and dance cruise on the Spirit of Boston. And we'll return on Saturday after spending the day at Six Flags in England.
The expenses of the trip will be as follows. The bus, one charter bus for 3 days and 2 nights will be $7,100. Six Flags New England with the meal plan is going to be $4,236. Spirit of Boston dinner cruise is $5,744. The New England Aquarium is $711. The Quincy Market lunch, $1,500. The dinner at the hotel is $1,000. The hotel is going to be 16 rooms per night. And that's going to be 2 nights, which will be $6,400. So the total is going to come out to $26,691.
However, we did receive the O'Connor grant, which will subtract $5,000 from that total, as well as taking $6,000 out of our class fundraising over the course of our tenure here. The final trip cost will be $15,691, and divided that by 41 students who put down a deposit for $100 each. The total will be $282.71 per person. For students who participated in the pizza sales, Brooks Barbecue Dinner, and Gertrude Hawk fundraisers, a percentage of the profit will be used towards their own cost of that trip. The chaperones will be Tracy Dieter, Marcia Albrecht, and Nate Cutting. Are there any questions?
No?
Okay. I think you covered it well.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have on our agenda the travel club presentation.
We did have a couple students sort of sub out, so we're sort of improvising a little bit here. Couple students couldn't make it. So just who wants to do this? Me?
Yeah.
Okay, briefly.
You give them the option.
Flew into Panama City. Spent a couple days there. We took a short flight to David at the west of the country. A bus to Chiriqui that, happened to break down, but only temporarily. So they had another one come for it. And so there we did zip lining, whitewater rafting, things like that. We took the bus down to Chitre. Spent a couple of days there at a really nice hotel. Where we did, surfing lessons and snorkeling. And then we, worked our way back to Panama City for the return flight. Do we? Somebody put these in, right? Okay. That was good. You want to
He
talk
didn't
about the
get to
bus
review them
driver?
first.
My favorite person
Yeah,
on the
me-
trip
me
was
straight
the
down.
bus driver, Dorman. Me and him got really close. I learned a couple of words in Spanish. Said hi to him every day,
Bottom
Ask him how
center
he's
picture there.
but yeah, I love Dorman.
Yeah. Who did that? Who did that?
I put these photos in. This is a picture of the old Panama Canal. We didn't go and see the new one, but these are the old locks, and we had our guide tell us about everything, all the boats that go through the Panama Canal and how it works. And then I think it was that same day we did the bike tour. So they gave us all bikes, and then we did about a 10K around Panama City. We got that view right there. It's really nice.
No view, someone that flaked out, okay, so, this is where, this is near, oh, shoot, I forget that, well, Phuket, there we go, this is where we did our zip lining. And on the way out, there's even, low center there, there's a, picturesque rainbow for us leaving and everything. But very nice, top left there, are hanging bridges, some of them were over 100 feet, or over the valley.
There were 6 total hanging bridges and then about 9 zip lines.
Bottom left, there's a tea plantation. They're the first they have in Central America. They're growing there. It's kind of cool. There's coffee plantations around too, so. Leave it to me, okay. So this is, Isla Iguana, so Iguana Island, and there's iguanas, so that's nice. Lots of hermit crabs. We took a short boat ride. Caroline almost got sick, not quite. Short boat ride out to this island, where we did some snorkeling, as well as just, enjoying some sun, getting sunburned.
We got to go on a hike on the island, and they brought us to like the other side of this, and I did not. But you did. And we got to see all the rocks, and like there were these little pools in the rock, and it was just cool to see all the different sea animals and stuff that are living there.
Is this any?
That's the hike in the morning
Yeah.
and listening.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mishmash there. Yeah, the short hike we did, you can see the skyline of the city there.
Oh, this was the bee farm. Bee farm and butterfly farm. We took a really nice tour and learned a lot about ancient bees and how they create their hives and the type of honey. And then we did a honey testing while some visited a butterfly sanctuary. We tasted 30 honeys, and one honey was from the Mayan bees, which cost, I think, $15 an ounce for it.
Oh my
For-
goodness.
It was really good.
It was.
It's really good.
It comes in like this tiny little dropper, so.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that's Miss Dieter's picture. She took,
Those
no?
are also my.
There you're, okay.
The first 3 pictures in order from left to right are traditional Panamanian foods. The one on the very left, basically, pot roast. And then the bottom one, we went to a fonda at, what was right before we went to Isle of Iguana.
Yeah, it was, yeah. It was sort of a roadside cafeteria.
So you get a plate of any food you want for $5 flat, and then a drink was $1 or $2. So the food was really good, hot, and they make it fresh every day. Then on the top, that was just another meal. A lot of us tried plantains for the first time. We had a lot of beans and rice and different types of meat.
The most interesting thing that I ate during the trip was probably cow intestine, and I was not a fan.
We give you credit for trying it.
Did you know that's what it was when you ordered it?
Unfortunately, but I didn't order it. It was dated.
Just assorted more meal. We did, there was some, sort of Americanized, we had burgers a couple times, but we did have a lot of traditional, authentic food.
The food was the best part.
These are yours, right here.
I was very interested in the canal, cause I originally thought that it ran off pumps and stuff, but actually it's gravity fed through all the vents and stuff that raised the ship. And the doors open and let it go through with the locks. I love the pictures of the old canal.
So they no longer use this.
I think they
This
do.
was
do
used for
Okay.
smaller ships. It doesn't hold the big container ships that the
Okay.
new canal was made for.
If the bottom left picture way in the background, you can almost make it out, that's, the new one, it's only like 10 years old. The new canal is much wider. But these were the original two canals that the United States helped construct
We
and
got
ran for like
to watch the video or movie about it, narrated by Morgan Freeman in 3D.
Wow.
good stuff. Inventive. Anything else come to mind? And was it fun? Was it worth it? All right.
Everyone there was like super nice and definitely helped us a lot, even though we didn't all speak Spanish very well.
So is the trip guided? Do you have guides that are taking you to all the adventures?
Yeah, we had one main guy, and then like at each different thing, there was like groups of staff.
Have you gone on one of the travel club trips before? Was this your first date?
Yeah, we typically do juniors or seniors or eligible every 2 years. You get one.
So I know you're at the age group that you're fearless, but were there at any time during your trip that you just felt uneasy with the location?
So on the first day in Panama City, we went into Old Town, which is like old Panama City where the president's palace is. And this was where David Gachalian ordered cow intestine. And that restaurant mainly only speaks Spanish, and it was like being the first day, it was kind of overwhelming. But Caroline helped me like calm down, and then I ordered my food in Spanish. And but it's overwhelming, like the culture shock at first, but then as you get used to it, you just like gotta take it all in and enjoy it all. You still have it.
Nice,
Yeah, EF doesn't take us anywhere dangerous or anything anyway.
Right.
It's a lot of, like, some touristy places and then, others are sort of authentic, sort of small towns. Everywhere saying, we're always with the guide. There's always people with it. I'll just, briefly, I think you all have this, briefly talk about the next one. So in 2 years, February 2026, we're planning to do Costa Rica, which is the same trip we did 4 years ago. That was the first trip I went on. I thought that was the best, the most fun. I'm not gonna read the whole packet, you all have it, but, some like Tortuguero going out in that barrier island is, you take river boats to go out there. There's no roads going to the island and just stuff like that is really amazing experience. And it happens to be one of the cheaper trips. So I think it's one of the best values. This trip was near $4,000, where this Costa Rica trip, I think it's 35, I think it's 35 and change. But there's a $200 discount if we get an early bird, if we sign up sooner rather than later. But I can't find the page. It's somewhere. Yeah, there. All right. So, briefly the itinerary here. Yeah, program price, with the insurance, is right at 35.29 per student. But there would be a $200 discount, so basically pay for the insurance. I'll bring it down to 3,300 about. So that's what we're hoping to do in a couple of years for February, right?
So with students now, if they are anticipating attending that trip in 2026, they can start raising funds now.
Right, yeah, should we get approval, within a month or two, Tracy and I will probably have a meeting for parents, for students that are interested. Yeah, and we'll sort of, if they're interested, they can get signed up, start doing payments and start doing fundraising.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'll have almost the full 2 years to raise money.
For this trip, for Panama, I think that I was able to pay off a good chunk of it through the fundraising. Like, we did car washes and we did airport breakfasts, and we sold poinsettias.
I think what's great about knowing that you want to go on the trip ahead of time and seeing the other classes go on the trip is that over the summer, I saved up my own money to help pay off the trip just because I was so like enthusiastic about going on this Panama trip. So that was great about knowing ahead of time that I wanted to go.
Very responsible.
Okay,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's very interesting.
Come see the musical.
this weekend.
We will.
Yeah, good plug, Eva.
7 o'clock.
Go practice that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is the NYSERDA bus electrification study.
So we have Steve Pfizer. I don't know if you remember Steve. He was here during the interview phase from Arcadis now.
Yes, that is correct.
And I'll let you take it from here. And
Sure,
introduce
thank
your
you. Yes, so
presenter.
I am an architect with Arcadis. You're probably wondering why is an architect doing a bus electrification study? But with me is Mackenzie DeCarla, virtually. So Mackenzie is actually part of our transportation group. So we have a pretty big transportation group that does a lot with transportation. Actually, now they're involved quite heavily with us in doing a number of these same types of bus electrification studies for school districts across New York State. So we're just going to kind of give you an overview of the study and the findings, and certainly as we're going through it, if there's any questions, please ask. We want to make this as informative for you as possible. So, maybe. No work. If not, the arrow, I assume. Yeah, you, all right, so, scope of the study, basically, it's a comprehensive, analysis for Walton of what bus electrification is all about to the district and how you could kind of phase it in over a number of years. So, we'll get into all the details of it, but it is a pretty comprehensive, study. It's being funded through the NYSERDA Clean Green Schools program. You're actually eligible for 100% funding. So actually NYSERDA just pays us direct. So you're basically getting a lot of good free information on bus electrification. I'm just going to quickly highlight maybe some of the steps along the way, and then we'll certainly get into some detail of how it impacts Walton. So first thing we always have is kickoff meeting, just to understand exactly what we're doing. Then we get into an infrastructure review, basically of your bus garage facility. Obviously, we know the building from the building condition survey, and this is a little bit different. We're looking at it obviously from the perspective of bus electrification. So one of the biggest things is looking at the electric service. Obviously, you're going to have a much greater electrical need at that facility, but we also look at your storage bays, your lifts. These electric buses are much heavier. So there's a number of things that we look at within the existing building. Then we do a route analysis. So we basically take all of the routes that you currently do today with the diesel bus. We put those routes into a program that we have. It takes into account all factors of those routes. So every single stop, all of the hills. Obviously, when you're going uphill, it's going to take more energy than when you're not. We have to take into account weather. Usually the worst conditions are in the winter months. So when it's colder, where we might have slipperier roads, so it takes all that into account. And basically, it's gonna tell us, and Mackenzie will share with you some of the results, but it's gonna tell you, can an electric bus do the same route as a diesel bus today? And we'll go through the findings, in a minute. From there, we basically take that data, and if we have some failures, what can we do a little bit differently? So you can obviously continue to service your routes the way you are today, without hopefully having to increase the number of buses. We then look at infrastructure modifications. So again, the biggest thing is that electric service. That's the thing that's really holding us up right now. We actually don't have the study done. We're working with NICEAG. NICEAG has been a little slow, which we kind of knew going in. It does take a while to kind of go through that process. I'm hoping we're getting close though, to them coming on site to do a more detailed analysis so we can get the findings. Basically, all we're trying to find from them is we've given them, this is the capacity, electrical capacity that we need for charging the buses. Can they provide that service to the facility? That's ultimately what we're trying to find. Yes.
Do you calculate that on just one facility, the bus garage, or do you have capabilities up here for trips, things like that for other neighboring schools coming here that would also need that service?
So we focused right now at the bus garage. Typically what we do is we focus on the bus garage. If for some reason we just cannot get the electric service we need or just problems, we will look at other sites potentially for doing some charging. It does make sense in many districts to also add a charger in other areas, at least in the future, if the whole premise of electric buses coming to your site, they need to charge,
Right.
They can charge and then go back. That's still a big question mark right now as to how that might work. So we haven't been putting that into the report yet, but I think that if things go the way people are talking, that does make sense to certainly provide that in the future.
In our last capital project, the only thing we didn't do was put the underground infrastructure to our dedicated bus lane, but we have a fully dedicated bus lane for sporting activities, things like that, where we expect our neighboring schools to have the freedom of being able to park in that entire bus lane uninterrupted. So adding chargers to that potentially in the future is something we probably should consider.
Sure.
Probably as a later step, I get it, but you know, in the future, I think that would be.
Yeah, we can put something in the report in
We
regards to
actually
that if
did
you like.
We kept the conduit.
Yeah.
Underneath the bus lane, so out past the middle school, there's the ability.
The biggest thing is how many do you need? I mean, adding a
Right.
few is probably not gonna be a big impact to anything, but you start adding a lot. Or if you get into fast charging, which takes more energy draw,
Mhm.
then it may start to get into impacting your electric service. But we can look at that a little bit, just as a little add to the study.
Just to follow on that, so is NICEAG also looking at this campus then as well? Because you're talking about here,
Oh, yeah.
that was, you guys are looking at the bus.
We're looking at the bus garage, yeah.
So that would also need to be evaluated for this site as well.
We could do a little analysis of this site, getting the data on the electrical usage of this facility, and we'd want to determine like how many charging stations we want here, and we could do a little analysis for that, yes.
But also
And-
according to NICEAG as well.
Oh, with NICEAG,
Yeah.
well,
Because it's, they would also need to.
yeah, again, I guess if you were to get into a number of charging stations, then we might have to get NICEAG involved, but most of the time with an existing service, usually we at least get 2 bus charging stations in without, not an impact, sometimes more. It all depends on what that service is.
Again, if we have round trips coming out of Townsend School, you'd want to consider that campus as well. Potentially. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it would be like you don't want a ton of them there, because that's not what we're gonna do with majority of your charging, but I can just see everybody's gonna be dependent on chargers.
Yeah.
And if you have a campus that doesn't have them, that's gonna be a problem.
Yep.
You won't be able to hold events.
Right.
Right.
Okay, we'll certainly add that to the report. We look at a charging schedule, that again, basically gives us what is that electrical demand that we need. So then we can, get that to NICEAG again for confirmation if we can get it. And then there's just kind of a transition roadmap, obviously by 2035, at least the regulations are right now say that we need to have a full electric bus fleet. So a plan to get to there. I'm sure it's gonna adjust in time, but at least it's a plan for right now. And then obviously, final study report. moving on. So real quick, Mackenzie will probably talk about different types of buses, so just so you're aware of what the different types are. So obviously the A's are kind of the smaller buses. B's really not utilized much at all, and they don't even make electric buses in B right now. C is the most common, that's what you pretty much have. D's are just a little bit bigger than the C's. You do have a series of smaller vans as well, so that was also in the analysis that we did, and probably you'll see in this. So Kenzie, you take over on our route analysis.
Great. I guess I just want to confirm you can all hear me, right? That I'm coming clear. Perfect. Awesome. And then I'll also later on actually add something to the point that you were discussing earlier about the other schools charging. We do have a little bit of that factored into the analysis later. So when we get to that slide, I'll make sure to point that out. But the very first step we did is we looked at all of the what we call blocks, which is kind of what a single bus does in one day. And you'll see two different graphs, and they're probably a little small at this point, but what it shows on the y-axis, so the vertical axis, is how much energy is consumed by a given bus. And along the x-axis, so along the bottom, it shows the durations. You'll see buses pull out in the morning, they haven't used any energy, and by the end of the day, they have consumed a certain amount of energy. And so there's two horizontal lines on the graph. The dashed red line is the effective capacity of the buses, and then the black line is the absolute. So yeah, thanks Steve for pointing that out. So the black value is the listed nameplate value, so the value they'll list on the manufacturer's bus. There is this gap between the two where we don't recommend you use more than a certain percentage of the bus. That is both because it degrades the battery quicker if you used a full range of the battery. And then also there is some recommended level for kind of safety to ensure the bus can come back at the end of the day. So we use this effective limit to actually try and model for it. And so we modeled a number of vehicle types based on the types of models that are available currently in New York State for electric buses. We primarily used IC buses or international buses because that's what you currently use. And there were two main types of international buses. There's their mid model and then their maximum model. The max model has a bigger battery size by about 50%. And so when we did the analysis, all of your daily trips could be done with the max model. And so that's what's showing. And you can see the two lines, the blue and the brown, that are kind of higher than the other ones are your BOCES trips. And so those are ones where, in addition to picking students up in the morning, which is kind of that first lineup, and dropping students off in the afternoon, which you can see is true for all of them, these two ones that are higher also have these afternoon runs, which are to do those BOCES trips. And so those two trips do require you to use the max bus. All the other model type C were compatible with all vehicle types except for the BOCES trips. And that was also true for the type D vehicle. So this means you do have a bit of flexibility on which vehicle manufacturer you'd go with for everyone other than the BOCES trip, but you could complete all of your routes with the existing vehicle models. So any questions on this before we go to the next slide? The next few slides will actually be talking about your extracurricular or special trips that we also modeled as part of this as well.
So clarification, these would have to be the type D buses or the type C with a max battery?
It would be the types, and I think I maybe missed a portion of that, but the type C max is what's shown up top, which is the type C is the type of bus you currently have. And the type D has, I believe, a pretty similar battery and load profile to the type C mid. We have graphs for that. We didn't show it here, but it similarly performs to that lower graph where the two BOCES runs exceed the effective limit.
We're going over this red dash line, this run here and this run are going above it, so that's considered a failure.
Yeah, so that's why we recommend the type C max for at least all of them, and definitely the BOCES trips. You could have more flexibility with the other ones if you wanted.
What assumption is that made based on temp? I mean, is this just an average of all ranges? Or is this showing us any extremes on either way? Battery life being impacted by temperature. I'm assuming the flat line is where you're basically sitting the
That's
bus
correct.
idle.
Yes, yeah,
And then the pumps are on the ends. So
Correct.
that's assuming no recharge in that period.
that's correct. And the reason, we should have gotten into the reason we do that is you never know
Right, sure.
when you're gonna have an emergency. You open school in the morning, suddenly get a ton of snow, you gotta get the kids home. If you had to rely on charging and they weren't charged, obviously you'd have a problem. So when we look at these, the first thing we always look at is, okay, can we get through the entire day without having to worry about charging a bus because of the unknowns that might surface? That's really the way we look at it. In some instances with some schools, we may figure in some charging, and that doesn't say you couldn't charge a bus during the school day, but for our analysis, we don't want to rely on that.
So is this assuming, what?
Yeah, I can answer that. It assumes the worst case scenario. It assumes that for you, it will be the cold situation. So in the middle of the winter, we take your local climate and we model this for what it would look like in the winter when you're having to heat the buses from whatever the average low in January is, probably something like 15 degrees. And so we've taken that temperature, and that's what we've modeled this for. We model it based on your route, so it also accounts for the elevation profile that your vehicles do. And it also models the impact of kind of stop and go traffic to pick up the students, and models it based on the speed of the different road types. So the number of factors that it incorporates, but it is modeled to be the most conservative, and so it does model the winter scenario. So on a typical fall day where the weather is nice, you would actually be performing better than this.
How much of a difference would you expect between, say, 15 degrees and minus 15? Because we can have really extreme low temperatures in mornings in our deep valleys that could push the batteries to a limit. So I'm
That's
just
a good
curious.
question, yeah. Do you have an answer to that, Ken?
Yeah, so I mean, in winter weather, and I mean, I've looked at kind of data for kind of Boston, which would be pretty similar. That it often heating and cooling can account for about kind of 20 or 30% of the energy consumption. And so, and I guess I want to confirm that I would have to go back to my notes to check what the low temperature it is. But we looked at your climate data and we picked what the low temperature for the coldest month was, and that the other thing we generally recommend is when vehicles are plugged in, they can do what's called preconditioning. So that's while they're still plugged in, they'll heat the vehicles up to the temperature they need to operate during the day, which is one of the main heating loads, is to do that initial heating up. And so they'll already start up warm. They will have done that while plugged in, so they won't draw any of the charge from the battery itself. So it'll start off fully charged and warmed up, particularly on those cold winter days. And this is one of the reasons we also like to not assume any midday charging, is because in those cases, there is that room for tolerance that you could then charge midday on those worst days if needed. But we're trying to come up with a situation where you would not have to assume any of that.
All right.
So I have a question. I think we still run chains in the wintertime, icy conditions, back roads. Will that have an impact, and has that been figured in, the automatic chain system?
Kenzie?
And could you just describe the automatic chain system? Sorry, are these like typical chains? I guess I just want to be familiar with what an automatic chain system is.
They're on spot chains.
On spot chains. They're air operated that swing down against the inside of the two tires and spin underneath the wheels.
Gotcha.
Okay, and sorry, that was a little too far from the mic. I didn't quite catch that.
It's basically an automated thing that's on the bus, so if additional traction is needed, actually somehow these chains would actually come down to help with traction. I assume that's like a short duration that they being used.
Just low speed and icy conditions, and they flip the switch and they go back.
They go back up, okay. So if it's limited use, I wouldn't think it should have a huge impact on the amount of energy. I'm sure it does have some, but if it's a shorter duration, I mean, if some of the buses, if we're really getting close to that red limit, we might need to think about that. Maybe the routes that might normally have to use the chains, you want to make sure you have a bus that if for some reason you needed that a little bit more energy, you're on a route that or a bus that will handle that. But I wouldn't think it would have a huge impact.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I guess I'd also add that typically electric vehicles both have kind of better torque performance and often have more there's a variety of reasons that they typically perform better in things like snow. So we'll I will look into that chain situation, but I agree with Steve's initial assessment. Okay, well then if we want to go to the next slide, the other thing we modeled was your extracurricular trips. And so we noticed that you did a few hundred trips, whether they're sports trips, field trips, etc., throughout the year. So that's in addition to your normal student pickup and drop off every day. And so it worked out to about 9 trips a week. And there was a real range. So most of the trips, over half of them, were less than 50 miles for a specific trip, which is very easily accomplished by one of these buses, even after doing the rest of their service. At the same time, 1 or 2 of them were incredibly long. The longest one was 442 miles, which I believe was to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and back, if I remember correctly, for some sort of sports game. And obviously, I mean, even with your existing diesel or gas vehicle, I imagine you don't make it the whole way there and the whole way back without refueling at least once. And so we broke your trips into different segments in 25-mile increments. That's what's kind of on the right side, that we showed the energy performance for trips that were kind of 25 miles, for trips that were 50 miles, for 75, etc. And you can see also that the reason the 2 highest ones, which I think are 300 and 400, both were full day trips. And so these weren't buses that were reassigned from that were doing other services. These were ones that were taken out on a Saturday or Sunday, likely, or during a weekday, and taken apart separately, and drove all day, and definitely exceed the effective capacity. So as we modeled this, we kind of group things into a few different categories. And actually, this is where we'll use the next couple slides. So if you don't mind clicking to the next slide. So 55%, so more than half of them, fell into these ones that could be done easily by adding them to existing blocks. So that's some of the trips that use less energy in the morning and afternoon. You could easily add and assign them to a sports trip in the evening without requiring any charging during the day. And so these ones are ones that we aren't particularly concerned with and make up the majority of your trips. If you click to the next slide, the next 27%, so this accounts for over 80% of your trips. These are ones that can easily be completed by the vehicle if it is fully charged. And so that means either you have a dedicated vehicle that was not part of either morning or afternoon pickups and drop-offs to be assigned to this trip, or it means you do midday charging, or you charge at the destination. So maybe say you go to a sports trip and you do some charging at their location. With a high-speed charger, you're usually able to charge these vehicles in 1 to 2 hours, and we proposed some of those to be available at your garage. So it should be feasible both for sports trips and during midday charging. Now we can go to the next slide. So this is at this point you're representing 98% of trips, and this is if you have a vehicle that's fully charged and it goes to the trip and is able to charge for kind of about an hour and a half at that other location, it can return back with no problem. And so as long as you have agreements worked out with the schools you're going to, and you have a bus that is fully charged, you are now able to complete these trips. And that leaves the last 2% that would require you to stop midway. And so that would be maybe, for example, the trip to Hershey, Pennsylvania. You would not be able to get the whole way to Hershey, Pennsylvania on a single charge, and would need to, whether it's stop at a rest stop along the way, that these are kind of standard chargers that you'd be able to charge at many service stations these days. But these would be the most troublesome of the route. And I guess some assumptions that are part of this is one, typically we found that battery size has increased about 5% a year. And so this is with current battery size. And so if in 10 years, you might have batteries that are significantly larger and that they would then be able to perform better. In addition, higher speed chargers are continuing to come out, and charger frequency is coming out so that you will have more locations where you can charge at a higher rate. And so this is kind of a conservative estimate with existing vehicles. And I think once again, the takeaway is that the bulk of your vehicles can easily merge with your existing service, but there are some trips that will either need to be continued to be operated by your diesel vehicles in the near to middle term, or you'll need to find these alternative strategies to handle them. And so I might pause here for a second as well. I know that this is something that people often have questions about as well.
So those longer trips would actually have to charge on the way down and way back? If I'm understanding that correctly, it wouldn't
Yes.
get,
Yeah.
right, so that takes
Once
three
you hit
charges.
this red line, it's a failure, so yeah, you have to be charging here or here, using the veil to get there, so yeah.
Right.
And that's 2 hours on a quick charge.
Right,
Approximately.
Yeah, I mean-
A lot of it depends on how much battery is actually left. If it's fully depleted, it's probably gonna be a lot more than 2 hours. So it does vary depending on how much of a charge you have.
Would that affect our driver's time of allowed to drive?
Yes, it could.
6 hours of charge time,
And we
Sounds like a hotel room sometimes.
For
For overnight stay.
yeah.
Right, you wouldn't be able to keep the expense under, but
Again, keep in
I would
mind.
also-
Keep
Yeah, I
in
just would
mind
also
that-
add that there's only 6 trips all year that fit those two lines. So I mean, it is a challenge, but I would also say that for the bulk of your buses, that is not what it will be operated for.
Right.
Might be more efficient just to charter that trip.
Yeah,
I mean, you're gonna transition gradually to electric buses, so
Yeah.
it's probably quite a while before you really need to do that route with an electric bus, because you're gonna have diesel buses available. And by 2035, will you be able to do that whole run on an electric bus? Maybe you will. I mean, it's like any other technology. It's gonna improve in time. You just know that. How well it will improve, there's some unknowns there, but.
Pavement charging,
And there's 2 guaranteed elections between now and then,
charging while you drive.
so.
Yes.
One of the options you discussed was saving a bus to use it for afternoon runs. Do we do that currently? Like, do we have extra buses that we could save?
We typically leave our regular route buses on their route each night, and we have the spare buses that go on trips. So, you know,
We have spares now.
we do.
Okay.
So, yeah, you have a full charged bus available. Obviously, you can't get to Hershey, but maybe you can get somewhere not quite as far if it's fully charged.
What the price tag on the new buses again, is that 400,000 range? I don't know if we're gonna have any spares.
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
As of right now, I haven't heard that changing a lot, so I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, there's variables, but yeah, it's 400, 450. They're not cheap, but again, like any technology, in time, it's gonna improve and probably prices will come down. No guarantees, but that's kind of the thinking out there, is prices will come down over time.
Well, we're 11 years out, right? It's not a long time.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So there's a number of studies that, as Steve was saying, say that the prices between diesel and electric buses are gonna meet in the next 10 years. I mean, what's gonna happen in the next 10 years and what the cost will be even 3 years down the road is always a question. So we've based off the current numbers, and that's kind of what you have to plan off of. Okay.
Is there a model for those, for the contract mechanisms to purchase electricity at another school site? That you guys
Nothing
are
is in
aware of?
place. There's a lot of talk about that is probably what will happen. How it works, who knows? So it'll be like a credit card that you swipe at somebody else's and then you get a bill. Hard to say, but I mean, it makes sense. If you have to go far and you have to charge there, you can somehow have chargers available for other buses, and there's some type of payment system in place.
Yeah.
But nothing's really been ironed out yet.
Is there many districts that you're aware of that have made this leap, or is everybody kind of like
So I
Checking
know
into
the Bethlehem Central School District actually in 2022 now, I think, purchased, I believe, 5 buses. They used a grant program, so they actually got $1 million rebate. So in reality, it wasn't any more than buying the diesel buses. I don't know how it's going. More recently, the Johnson City Central School District purchased a bus. I heard the other day, and this is, I don't know if this is true, but I heard they have not used it for a bus run yet. I don't know why. I guess there's problems. They've had problems with it. It's been in the shop. So they haven't been able to do a single run. Again, that's what I heard. I can't guarantee that's the truth. I heard that through another transportation supervisor that said that they were talking to Johnson City.
Same story as Downsville.
State Downsville has one.
Yeah.
Oh, Downsville does have one.
They
They
don't.
use it in the shop.
Is that right?
Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to blame that on electric, where I've worked, we've got diesel, that's the same thing. It's brand new and we trail them back to the garage. So it's nature of the beast.
Okay, so this slide mostly summarizes some of the things that I'd said on the last couple slides. So one is that the battery capacities are improving, that we've generally seen that a 5% increase every 2 years. And so that's why kind of in 10 years, you could have batteries that are kind of 30% plus larger and able to do more trips. The first point around reblocking was the point that the 2 BOCES trips are the hardest trips to perform. And if you wanted to have a smaller size of bus, like a smaller battery size, you'd be able to pair the midday trips to accommodate BOCES on other morning and afternoon trips. So basically reassign those BOCES trips to other buses and still be able to do it with even smaller battery sizes. So that it was noting that that is an operational change that could be made if desired. But as we said as well, you could also just get the larger battery and would be able to perform the trips as is. And then
Today is, sorry to interrupt. Today,
No.
is there a difference in cost on a battery size?
yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things that you at the end of the day will have to kind of ask the bus manufacturer for a formal quote, but I think we found that it's typically around $10,000 to $15,000 more for that extra battery, and you get 50% more battery. So it could be worthwhile. A bigger battery does mean a slightly heavier bus, and so there's more energy consumption. So it is a bit more expensive, but it would then give you more flexibility to do those trips than otherwise.
Thank you.
And then for these special trips, the extracurriculars, as I was saying, they include both sports trips and field trips and a variety of other things. I mean, as I said, I think there was close to 400. So there was, I'm sure, a number of different things that they came from. We recommend where possible, if you are using buses that are also doing morning and afternoon runs. It sounds like you mostly have these as dedicated vehicles. We would recommend using the fast charger midday so the buses are as fully charged as possible. And then some of these buses for the longer trips, we said, would require charging at their peer destinations. And so arrangements should then be made with other school districts. As Steve was saying, I mean, and we'll actually get to this on the next slide, it's going to be quite a while until you'll be fully electric. I mean, even in this, it's 2033. And so you might not even need to finalize those arrangements for quite some time, though, is something to consider. So I'll talk through this slide quickly because there's often some questions around it. So the New York State has two requirements for this transition to zero emission vehicles. The first is that as of 2027, all new school bus purchases should be zero emission, and also that by 2035, all your fleet should be zero emissions. I believe there's a couple, you can write for an exception for a 6 or months or a year-long extension, but we assume that you weren't asking for the exception and got that approved. And so 2027 and 2035 are the years to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is, I know currently you lease the vehicles. Sometimes with some of these grants, there's requirements around owning the vehicles. And so we assumed ownership of the vehicles and a recommended useful life of around 12 years, which is what we've seen fairly typically at other school districts. And so it'd mean that you would not want to purchase a new diesel vehicle 12 years within 12 years of the 2035 date, because otherwise it would mean you would have to retire that vehicle before it's reached its useful life. So you'd have to retire it before it's completely finished. And so that would mean that even as of 2024, it is you would not really be able to procure new diesel vehicles without retiring them early. We've talked to districts that have other strategies, whether it's for example, you are leasing your vehicle, so you obviously could easily meet that time period by leasing diesel vehicles up until 2027 or et cetera. And so then their lease would expire also, and or if you buy a diesel vehicle in say 2026 and you sell it to another school district before that 2035 year. But we assumed no new diesel purchases at this point. Because you would have to likely retire them before the end of their useful life. And so that is why there are a few electric school bus purchases. So 3 of the type A, which are the smaller vehicles, and 3 of the full-size type C buses and 1 of the vans. And so you would then kind of proceed through that. And it looks like in 2027 you have some more purchases, and then actually a bit of a pause for the most part until closer to 2033. And so what is helpful about that is, as you saw, that most of your trips are very easily completed within the effective range of these buses, and most of your special trips or sports trips or extracurriculars could be done as well. And so you would not be worrying about a fully electric fleet until close to that 2035 date. But so this is what the procurement schedule we have assumed for the kind of costing, operational, and other recommendations that we have made on the next few slides. So I'll pause here for questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there's gonna be any lease options for electric vehicles? To think the district this size is gonna be able to purchase 4 electric vehicles in 2026, 3 years out from now, the way our budgets look, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not gonna happen. That isn't even realistic. To even say that the district's gonna be forced to buy 4 electric vehicles in 3 years, less than 3 years.
We still can lease them, but the lease is gonna be based on a 12-year lease, which even DOT is telling us is never gonna work rust wise for us, so.
No, I can't imagine it will, but I'm just.
Why is it 12 years? Is that SED saying that they will not reimburse for
It's because of the cost.
aid?
It's gonna take them that long to recoup.
Because we get aid the following year.
Yeah, they're talking about extending aid out. They're talking about lengthening the amount of the aid with the lease, because you're getting it that next year, but you're getting it by lease payments. We don't fund the whole amount in year 1, correct?
For which?
For, say,
For
a lease.
No, you don't.
So,
We get aided the same for a lease that we do for purchase.
When you purchase.
For 5
Right.
years. So they likely can't afford to reimburse districts the state aid for these over 5 years, so they're stretching it out to a longer period of time.
correct.
How they come up with policy.
Probably 12, because that's considered kind of the useful life of a bus.
Yeah, when we talk to other districts that own their buses, that's frequently how long they operate their buses. And that's also, I do a lot of work in the transit industry as well, and that's like a public transit bus is also usually 12 years for full size. I will say that the type A vehicles, the smaller vehicles, have a useful life of 8 years. It's a little bit shorter, but for the full size vehicle.
Have you guys taken this slide right here shocks me, quite frankly. Put dollar signs to that.
You'll see that in a moment.
Yeah, that'll be, I think, 2 slides from now.
Perfect.
Is this the least cost alternative
That's based upon a purchase scenario. Again, the criteria is you gotta be fully electric by 2035, and we're saying the 12-year life cycle. If you want to reduce it to 10, based upon your experience with buses, that would obviously change that a little bit. I guess it would probably push out have to maybe be buying those electric buses, because you'll have a shorter duration that you're gonna be keeping them, and again, 2035 is that end date where you have to have them be electric.
How easy
I
is
think
it for you
that's
to
a- it's
change simulations?
Depends on the purchase.
That's
If we
probably
were
pretty
to
easy.
purchase a diesel bus and we're not gonna get our complete aid back for 12 years, am I understanding that right? Or Megger, if we purchase a bus next year, a diesel bus,
Okay,
we flat out purchase it, how long before we get that aid back?
I think it's the next year.
The next year?
Well, actually, no. When we buy one, we won't have a payment in 24, 25. Our first payment will be in 25, 26. So it'll probably be 26, 27 before we get it.
But it's the year after, not extended.
And Ronnie,
it's
was
not
your
12
question
years.
around, was your question more around how much time does it take for us to pay off the actual investment? Is that a 12-year time frame,
Well,
or is that a?
Right, to get the
6-year
aid back,
timeframe?
correct. Like I don't, like
With
he
the bus
said,
makes sense.
retire it early. If we are gonna get the aid back within the next 2 years,
We won't get it. Not all of it, but currently they'll aid it over 5 years.
okay, so currently it's 5 years, but now they're saying 12. Okay,
And there is some concern, at least from what I'm hearing, if you lease an electric bus, you may not have the opportunity to get any grant monies. So just something to be thinking about, I guess, because right now, there's a number of grants out there. Most of them are kind of paying the difference between a diesel bus and an electric bus. So that kind of keeps you somewhat whole. But there are some issues or some things that you have to take into account, like the lease issues.
yeah, I mean, 12 years is
Because
not,
at least we don't
a
qualify
bus will
for
not
any
last
grant.
for 12 years around here.
Exactly.
So we would have to relinquish the bus before we got all the aid back on that bus. And then we wouldn't get it back because we don't have the bus in operation, so.
A lot of things to be thinking about.
Yeah.
We can't solve them all right now. Obviously, I know things are gonna change as this evolves, and my hunch is the dates are gonna extend out.
Mhm.
Everything we're hearing, it's probably gonna be the case. Actually, in 2026, NYSERDA is charged with preparing a report to understand what is the infrastructure, electrical infrastructure available for basically school districts to charge these buses, and what's the availability of electric school buses to be able to get these into school districts in the time that's needed. So I think that report's probably gonna say a lot as to whether or not those days slip. Obviously, whoever becomes in office might have some impact on that as well. So there's a number of variables. I guess, keep in mind, this is kind of a snapshot in time.
Right.
This is where we're at today. This is how it's gonna impact you today. Things I'm sure are gonna change in the future. So we'll just have to adjust the plan as the future unfolds.
All right, so we want to finish this presentation. Are you available after our budget workshop, which will be a short workshop? We do have to break at 7 to do that. But I'm sure we're gonna have more questions, if that's possible, if we have the time to do that. So we revisit that, but we'll hold questions to let you try to get through the presentation.
Sure. we can do
And
that.
then, is that okay? Can you
Yeah,
stick around, even if Mackenzie cannot?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
All right, so real quick on the charging, electrical capacity, all that. So actually, can you just move, Mackenzie, I can't remember how many chargers we were planning.
Oh, there's 12. Yeah,
Well, I see it now, Mackenzie. Your
Yeah.
screen was just in the way. I couldn't see the number.
I see.
So what we figured in, and actually this plan right here, I just noticed we're missing 4 buses in this bay. So there are 4 buses in that particular bay. So we were factoring in 12 level 2 chargers. So the level 2 chargers, they're a slower charge. When we talked about that fast charging, that's the ones that take like a couple hours. So we were factoring them in the building, and then you also have a few buses stored outside as well. Again, we were looking at charging basically in the overnight hours, and Mackenzie will kind of show you a charging schedule. We did factor in providing 2 fast chargers. Again, for whatever reason, you might just have the need, you've got to get some quick charge in a bus, it's nice to have those to be able to get that quick charge. You just never know when you might need it. So providing a couple of those at the bus garage facility makes sense. We are, in working with NICEAG, what we're looking at right now is actually just a whole additional service. So keeping the service you have today in place for everything you need in the bus garage, and then a second dedicated service basically for the bus charging is kind of at least what is being analyzed right now. Moving on.
So is all the charging inside?
So again, for all the buses that are inside, we'd have chargers for them. There are a few buses that are stored outside, so there'd be some additional ones outside. One thing maybe to just quickly mention, we are hearing things recently about insurance companies having issues of having electric buses stored in a bus garage facility. So that could come into play as well in the future.
That's a win-win.
Just keeps getting better.
Yes, it does. All right, go ahead, McKinney.
Yeah. And so, what this shows is kind of the peak power draw that you would need to charge all the vehicles, because as Steve was saying, that you're going to have the 12 slow chargers and then the 2 high-speed chargers. And so so there's 2 lines here. There's the thicker dashed line, which kind of shows that is a maximum that would be drawn from the grid, and so that's the number we're discussing with NICEAG to make sure that they can provide that. And I'll discuss the drop in a second. And then the solid but slightly thinner line shows how much power is actually drawn. And so what you'll see is when all the vehicles return, right at the top, there's a pretty heavy power draw. And then as each of the vehicles finish charging, it continues to drop off. And so you'll see that actually many of your vehicles, even by, I think it's around 1 or 2 a.m. there, are fully charged. And that by before like 3:30 a.m., all your vehicles are fully charged. And so this means it doesn't even need the full night to fully recharge all the vehicles. The other thing is that we have this drop between 4:15 and 8:30 p.m. every night to address, as you were discussing earlier, the desire to have charging available for visiting schools. So it's assumed that those 2 high-speed chargers at your bus garage might be available for visiting schools. And so it was not accounted for in your modeling, because we wanted to make sure that even if you did not do any charging of your own at that point and purely allowed other schools to charge, that you would still be able to charge your buses. And you can see that you're able to charge the buses well in advance of when they have to pull out in the morning. And yeah, and also there was the no midday charging assumed as part of that. So then these are the costs, these are the numbers you were asking for, and I know that you also have to go soon, so we can maybe answer some of those questions later. So the top graphic is capital costs and the bottom graphic is operating costs. You can see that the operating costs actually decrease, that electric buses, both electricity is cheaper than kind of diesel or gasoline, so your fuel / energy costs will decrease over time. In addition, the maintenance cost associated with electric vehicles is cheaper than diesel vehicles. So your maintenance costs should decrease over time as you configure your fleet. The top graph is the capital costs. So those are the costs. And you can see it's to procure vehicles, it's for the power infrastructure, it is for the chargers themselves. There's also going to be a cost for a new bus lift, because I believe your existing bus lift does not have the capacity to lift the electric bus. And so yes, those are the different costs, and you'll see that the bulk of the cost is the green, which would be the vehicles, and those are the primary cost driver. There is also a fairly significant cost for kind of an updated transformer and some of the other electrical infrastructure. Some of that, like the transformer, will have to be done at one time. Some of the conduit and other things could be spaced out if needed. I think, as we said, you can usually do about 2 vehicles before you do it, but we assumed that it would just be done in the very first year. So some of those costs could be shifted out, but they are obviously some big numbers, and these assume a full purchase of the vehicles.
Yeah, there probably is a little bit of play with that blue in 2026 being the infrastructure. A lot of it, again, depends on what's your plan for charging buses. So again, probably can get by with the existing service with a couple buses. So depending on your plan, maybe that can move out to 27 or 28. So just, I know you're probably saying, oh my God, 2026, 2 million. It might be able to get pushed out a little bit.
Yeah, and this also doesn't account for grants and funding, which Steve is about to talk about as well. So this is the pure cost that would be expected.
Yeah, I won't get into a lot of detail related to the grants because of timing, but again, there are a number of opportunities out there. As I mentioned before, leasing is a bit of an issue. High needs districts have more of a priority, so nothing's a guarantee with these funds, at least right now, but we are seeing more and more programs start up, so I'm anticipating that in the future, more and more opportunities would be available. Again, a lot of them are paying that delta between diesel bus and an electric bus. And there's some opportunities for infrastructure upgrades as well. A certain number of dollars per bus is available. So there's a number of things out there that certainly can be looked at for helping the financial side of things. I think that was it, right? Is that the last slide?
Yeah, that was definitely the last slide. And I guess the thing I'd add on I mean, as Steve was saying, it's not guaranteed, and that's why we didn't include in the costing. But when it's 150,000, 60,000 per bus and 65,000 per charger, I mean, if you did that for your whole fleet, that would be about $2 million. So when you saw that big line item up front, there is big amounts of grants also being discussed.
Any other questions? Again, I can stay and we can continue the dialogue.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, yeah, I think, but if you can, that would be great. I mean, if online, if Mackenzie can go, that's okay.
Mackenzie, are you available later?
Yeah, I think I'm available. If you can give me a sense of, is this like
Yeah.
20 minutes, 40 minutes?
I'll reach
You
out to
text
you when
me.
we're getting close, so
Yeah.
then you can jump back on.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
That should work.
Yeah, actually, if you call me, Steve, sorry, I'll then join.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks.
Rick, do you have to start a new feed for?
I'm gonna have to cancel.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to suspend our general
To
meeting,
recess the meeting.
recess our meeting.
Second.
Motion second, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's carried. So we recess and we will join back as soon as we're done with